You're listening to Kayak Flyer with your host, Sean. This week we're brought to you by Tennessee Trailers, OutdoorAdventureTrailers.com, the best way to get your kayak to and from the water. Cutthroat Furled Leaders, the only leaders that I use. Cutthroat Furled Leaders are guaranteed to perform for whatever species of fish you're chasing. Check them out at cutthroatfurledleaders.com. Save 15% promo kayak. Stoneflynets.com, the very best in handcrafted and custom fishing nets made in the great state of Arkansas. Check out Stonefly Nets at stoneflynets.com. Hey guys, I'm glad to have you back, and I tell you what, I got another .com for you to check out, and that's Bream Bugs, BREAM Bugs.com. My guest tonight is Don with Bream Bugs, and we got to meet at the Sow Bug Roundup. We had a really great conversation, and I got to see some stuff that I don't normally see. You guys know I love going after smallmouth bass, and I've talked at length about my one-weight fly rod from Bajuco Flats Flyco. Pablo is a great guy. But I actually found a place that specializes in flies just for my one weight. Don, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad to be on.
So, bluegill, man, an underrated fish for the fly. A lot of guys are swinging 5 and 6 weights, and they're out catching trout, and they're catching smaller bass, catching a lot of things on. It's a universal flyweight, but I'm going to tell you what, my life changed with my one weight, and then it changed even more looking at your flies.
Well, good. Well, I enjoyed meeting you, and thank you for having me on tonight. I'll be glad to show you some of the flies as well.
Yeah, we can talk about some of them and the purpose and just how small the hooks are. So we've got a great episode coming up talking about that. Now, I do have to ask, of all the flies that you could sell in the world, I know you've got bass flies and panfish flies and some carp flies, but what is it about the sunfish, the bluegill, the small perch that you said, yeah, that's what I'm going after?
Well, first of all, you have to realize that I was born and raised in Mississippi, and we didn't have trout. Bluegill were our trout. So my dad, he had 4 sons, taught us all how to fly fish, primarily for bluegill and bass. And in the South, they refer to every panfish as brim. You could pull up a stringer and they'd have 4 different varieties on there, but to them, they're all brim.
Yep. and everything is a Coke, no matter what soft drink it is, it's a Coke.
Exactly. That's true. And one of the nice things about brim fishing is you can do brim fishing just about anywhere. Streams, lakes, golf course, ponds.
Yes.
It's a little, it's easy to get to because they need to keep them all mowed nice and clean around the edges.
Yeah, you don't have to wait for the ticks.
Yeah, they're usually full of bluegill. I mean, and sunfish as well, Yeah. But I enjoy the bluegill simply because the fight they put on is just spectacular.
It is. And I found that even in the late summer when I can't buy a bass, I can grab that one weight and I can still catch bluegill all day long. And it's about how much fun the fish is. It's not necessarily about the size of the fish.
That's true. And a lot of times when you're bluegill fishing, you catch bass.
Which is a no-no for the one weight.
Oh, yeah, right. Well, that would be fun. That would be a challenge. A lot of people ask me, they say, well, what is the best fly that you have for bluegill and bass? And I have to go by sales. In other words, what sells the best on the Bream Bugs website? And the best selling fly is one, let's see if you can see it here, there. You can see that. If you'll notice, it's a chartreuse body and black hackle and the chartreuse tail with white legs on it. And it's a hook size 8. And that is our number one best-selling fly.
And they love surface poppers. They really do.
Yes. And what I like about it is when they hit that surface popper. I love that strike, boy, I tell you. One thing about this, your viewers are probably familiar with the old Ricardo Tackle Company
Hmm.
in Baton Rouge. They went out of business. This particular style was their number one best selling fly, and it was called a Miss Prissy. You remember the Miss Prissy?
Yes, I
Yeah.
do.
And so the Pulse Popper Company, bought out a lot of our Ricardo's cork and started duplicating some of their best selling flies.
Yeah,
Um,
and that's an interesting thing because before the show we were talking about cork versus balsa, and cork is a lot harder to find than it used to be.
Well, and when you talk about larger flies like a bass fly, like this is probably a 1/0 or a 2/0, if I can get it on there.
Hmm.
Now, Pulse makes all of the larger poppers like this. He uses balsa, but on the smaller ones, like this one I was showing you here, that's cork.
Right.
Now, I do have, you find this interesting, I do have one supplier that makes all of his bodies out of the root of the tupelo tree. Let me see if I can get that.
Oh,
Have
that's
you heard
neat.
about that?
No, I've not. I guess that's
Okay.
something new for me.
Yeah, it's called a bee bug. Now, the nice thing about it is there's plenty of tupelo tree root available. It's not like balsa and cork, sometimes it's not available.
Yeah.
But the nice thing about the material, the wood, is that it absorbs the paint very well, so you don't get cracking when you're using it.
Hmm.
Plus, it's very buoyant. I mean, it floats very nicely, and so he's got a ready supply. He lives in Florida, so of tupelo tree root.
Well, one will last him a while, probably.
Yeah, yeah.
You know. One of the things that we had talked about, and I've been a huge advocate over the years for my friend Tony over at River Road Creations, and we were talking about when you and I were talking at Salbug about foam, and foam is fine when you're tying the flies,
Hmm.
and you get the hook back and it's in bad shape, you retie it. But for guys that don't tie, it really needs to be a wood.
Well, yeah, there's a couple of things about foam. They don't take the finish as well as balsa. For example, if you look at this is very slick, shiny, smooth. I mean, it looks like it was almost molded out of plastic, but it's balsa, and the balsa holds the paint better
Hmm.
and gives you a much smoother finish. I mean, you can sand balsa down as smooth as you want, but it's difficult to do that with foam.
Yeah, and, I mean, for me, I like, so for me, when I'm fishing top water, a lot of times I like to use like a stealth bomber,
Hmm.
and there's nothing wrong with it, but it's not gonna hold up,
Right.
and that's the thing. And if you're not a tyer, and a lot of guys, I mean, I tie flies for 5 guys. They all fly fish with me, and none of them tie. And so there's a large group of people out there that are not tiers.
That's true.
And when you're trying to find a bug, there's so many times that you find a bug and, they wanna charge an exorbitant amount. You don't know where it came from. You don't know what the quality is, but you guys are right there. You know a lot of your tires and you know where they come from, and you keep them because they're quality.
Well, and I try my best to focus on poppers and flies that are made in the USA.
Mhm.
I've got about five major tires and popper makers, all in the USA, and they all take great pride in their work. you
Yeah.
know, some of the stuff you get from overseas, I mean, it's just mass produced. There's no pride.
Yeah, and that's some of the stuff that I've seen is, you walk into a major box store and you're like, "Okay, none of these look anywhere similar to one another." And you can tell that the
Yeah,
thread was a cheaper thread. They didn't take the time to add the glue, the resin, or the epoxy, and
yeah.
those flies just fall apart. And I think a lot of guys who buy flies get kind of jaded, and well, I can buy that one for 89 cents. It's like,
Yeah,
yeah, you
yeah.
catch 2 fish on it too, and you're gonna be spending another
Right.
89
It,
cents.
it starts unraveling.
Yes, and so that's why it's so important to develop a relationship with your tires, which immediately within talking to you, I knew you did have that relationship, and I think that is something that we need to, as if we're talking about fly fishing and supporting the sport, supporting those folks here in the US that are doing that, you may pay a
Mhm.
dollar more than you would at, a big box store, but the quality is going to be about $3 more.
Well, and the nice thing about my line is if you have one that has a problem, you let me know and I'll send you a new one because we seldom ever get any complaints or get any back. I mean and that shows you the pride that the people take in making these quality flies. It's just no doubt about that.
Now, I'm going to tell you a secret, but I don't want you to tell anybody. Okay. When I tie my flies for four of my friends, I do everything perfect. For one of them, I actually, when I tie them, I cut the barb and the hook point off so that when he's putting it on, he can't tell, but then he never hooks up.
Yeah, right. He never catches any fish. Well, good for you.
And then I make the guy with the least fish buy the beer.
Yeah, right, right. Absolutely. Uh,
Hmm.
well, it's interesting in this business. Over the years, one of the major questions that I get asked is, "What is the best color to
Yes.
use?" And again, I've read articles about do fish see colors? Do they, do they are they or do they see shades of gray? This sort of thing. But on my website, the best selling color is always chartreuse.
And
Um,
my friends repeat that to me constantly. Can you make this, but can you make it in chartreuse?
and I don't know why the fish like chartreuse. I
I don't,
don't.
and we were talking last week with Ron Mayfield. I don't know if you got to meet him at Salbug or
Mhm.
not.
Yep.
He
Yep.
does a lot of deer hair flies, and we were
Right.
talking about the silhouette. And when you're looking at a fly where they're looking up, it's how much of that color are they going to see? And I think sometimes it's superstition. I really
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
It's I caught one on this. I like
Yeah.
this. I'm going to buy this, and it's really it's really amazing when you do things like that because the flies you were showing a minute ago, you've got up on the top of the fly, you got some black dots and some really nice painting going on. And, it's sort of like, where is that line between catching fishermen and catching fish? And that's always
Right.
interesting to me.
Yeah. Well, here is the bottom of the fly. That's what the fish sees. See,
Hmm.
that's what the fisherman sees.
Right.
And I had a fly tyer. He's passed away now. Walt Carey. He was known as the Popper King on the East Coast, a real character. And one day he sent me a new one that had just appeared on the front page, front cover of Fly Tyer magazine. It was beautiful, and he calls it Fire Tiger. And I
Hmm.
told him it looked like the Fourth of July explosion on the water. And he said, "Well, he said I don't paint flies for the fish. I
Yep.
paint flies for the fishermen."
And that fire tiger is amazing. There are so many trout guys that swear by that fire tiger.
Yeah, yeah,
That bright orange and that chartreuse green combination
yeah.
together. And I think as we were talking about, I think it's a mixture of the bright colors for us get our attention and those colors get muted in the water, but they're still different shades and it really
Mhm.
looks nice.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's one other, you were talking about superstition. There's one other thing that always amazes me, and that is they all want the red dot on the bottom. They
Yep.
call that the strike point. And I don't know. I don't think anybody's ever done a scientific study on whether that works or not.
Hey, you know what? I was talking to I think it was the guy right across from us that had all the tattoos. Tatted Fly Tire, I think is his name,
Oh yeah,
or his information.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I made a comment to him. I said, now eyes on a fly. And he just looked at me, goes, a good, and I said this last week with Ron, and Ron changed the order on me. But I
Yeah.
said a good fly catches fish. A better fly catches fish and or catches fishermen, and
Right.
the best fly catches both. And Ron had to stop me, and he goes, "No, the best fly catches fishermen."
Yeah, right, right. Yeah. Well, speaking of eyes, there are various colors of eyes, but this is
Yes.
one of the more popular ones, the bright red with a with a dot in the. in the
Yeah.
back.
And
Now
I've
that
noticed
one,
that that's like a
go ahead.
smalley eye. I mean, that's the color of a walleye or a rock bass or
Hmm. Hmm.
goggle eye, as we call them here, and a smallmouth.
Gargoyle, yeah,
And
yeah,
it seems to
yeah,
really just pop when they see it in the water.
yeah, yeah. I this particular one, by the way, this fly is was a duplicate of the old Peck's poppers. You
Hmm.
familiar with the Peck's?
Hmm.
E.H. Peckinpah was he started making poppers in the 40s, and in the 80s he sold out to a Cardo tackle company, and Accardo kept making the Pecks until he went out of business, and now Pulse Poppers from California makes all the Pecks poppers. Same style. They're obviously not the original,
Yeah.
but he does a really good job.
Well, you know what? Talking about older flies, what I think back on it now and I could just beat myself up. My dad gave me a tackle box, and he's like, and I watched him toss these hula poppers and plugs forever,
Mm-hmm.
and it
Mm-hmm.
was not a big deal. It was there was nothing big about it. And so when I was 14, 15, 16, and I was out fishing in the creeks and everything, I'd lose one or two here or there. If I had some of those 1940s hula poppers back, but I had no idea what they were. I had no
Yeah,
idea at the
yeah,
time that they were going to be worth what they
sure,
were. And it's
sure.
amazing to
Yeah.
see what those old cork and balsa flies are really worth now.
Well, since you mentioned that, when we were at the Salbug Roundup, a fella came up to me at my booth and said, "I have a collection of PEX, original PEX poppers in the original packages." And he said he's with, I think it's Real Recovery,
Hmm.
and they want to sell those and donate whatever money they make from the sale to Real Recovery.
Wow.
So if you're interested, I'll put you in touch with him.
Well,
He was at the Salbug Roundup.
it's probably a little bit more rich for my blood, but I could definitely post where they're going to sell them at on my Instagram and Facebook because that's a
Yeah,
great program. I mean, a
yeah,
lot you don't hear as much about that as you do some of the others, but they're all great programs that help
yeah,
get
yeah, yeah,
folks out on the water.
yeah, yeah. I was impressed that he came to me because he knew I had some of the duplicates of PEX, but I didn't have the new ones. And
Yeah.
I'll try to help him out if I could see if I've got. I have a couple of people who call me occasionally and want they're collectors. They want to know if
Hmm.
I have some old flies. I'm not a
It's
collector.
I've got a cousin, Lance. He's a great guy, but how he's figured out how to make a living doing this, I'll never know. But he makes a better living than I do as a school teacher. But he buys toys.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so he'll buy a Matchbox car or a Hot Wheels car for $3 or $4, and he'll go to a car show and he'll wind up selling it to the guy at the car show for 75 bucks
Oh my.
because it's the same car he's got. And so he got me I wanted a Gas Monkey Garage Midas monkey. I thought that was just the coolest. And I'll be damned if he didn't send me one. He got back home and he sent me one. I'm like, what do I owe you? He's like, you don't worry about it. I'm looking at it. It's like number 99 out of 299. And
No
my
kidding.
son keeps trying to get into it. And I keep saying,
Yeah.
no, because but I'm not that kind of guy. And it just blows
Yeah.
me away that I'm turning into that.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't have that kind of luck. I'd buy it for $1 and have to sell it for 50 cents.
Yeah, it's the collector's items though are really kind of neat, but you don't want to fish them. But if you can have something that's a replica of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of my friends, he's quit doing it after the pandemic, but he was making crankbaits, and he would have guys on the professional fishing tour that they had the super secret color to their crankbait, and they
Mhm.
wanted this bill on this body, and you're talking $30 or $40 for a crankbait. Luckily, flies aren't that expensive, but it
No.
can get pretty intricate when you're talking about
Yeah.
some of these flies and the paint jobs that go on them.
Well, and also the shape and form of the flies. I mean, I showed you that one, and it has a cupped face,
Hmm.
and you can see the cup. And then, of course, another one that I showed you, it has a little less. cup in the front like that. But some of them actually have a flat face. Uh, and everything you do to the shape you make it in is costing money to spend time doing it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can buy corks that are exactly like you want, but those days are not. Those days are gone. The cork people, they're too busy selling corks to the wine industry.
I tell you what, that's we were talking before the show, and I said I had some corks. They all came from bottles of wine. I mean, that's exactly
Right.
what it is, And
The
now
only
they've
one
got
I
this
have,
fake cork.
the only one I have that comes from bottle is this one. We call it the frog, and you can see the shape. You can tell that
Yeah,
it's a cork bottle.
I'd
But
call
you
it the
talk about,
lino.
you're right. Talk about shapes. Now, there's a round uh, cork.
Yeah,
That one is called a purple cow, and then this one. Now, this was Cardo used to make one called the round Denny, and now we have these from Pulse, which he calls roly poly. So the flies again, they're making those for the fishermen.
yeah, yeah. I
What?
mean, and it's the different sounds that come off the angles are important.
Right.
I
Exactly.
mean, that's one of the funny things. I deer hunt, and I've talked to people. They're like, yeah, in Missouri, it's illegal to keep your feeder running so many days before. And
Mhm.
this one guy's like, yeah, he goes, you just keep that feeder empty and running and they're there. And I'm like, well, that's kind of cheating, but then I'm hunting on a soybean field, so I don't really care. But um, but it
Uh,
is. I mean, the fish get acclimated to certain sounds of bugs hitting the water.
yeah.
And I've had great luck when I'm fishing terrestrials or top waters. You cast against a tree limb and it hits the tree limb and it falls straight down into the water. And the little things that you can do make so much difference.
Yeah. Well, and that's true. And the amazing thing is too, some days the fish like some noise. They like to hear the
Mhm.
popping sound. And then there are other days you go, they don't want any sound. They want it
Yeah.
to hit the
Yeah.
water, just stay there.
Yeah, and that's it's so wild to just
Yeah.
I'm sure it has to do with barometric pressure and a number of
Yeah.
different things, but it's
Yeah.
so I think it's really odd
Yeah.
how something with a brain that small, we spend so much time trying to trick it.
Trying to figure out how to fool, right?
Yeah.
One thing about the round cork though is that it will right itself. When if it lands upside down because of the weight of the hook, it'll turn over. So
Yeah.
that is one advantage of the round cork. It will right itself if it lands upside down. You
Yeah.
know.
And I mean, and you're selling some bigger bass bugs too.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've got here's one. I think this one is a one aught here, and it's the frog. And as you can see, it has an extreme indentation, which makes a real strong pop. Of course, you're trying to attract bass, and they like
Right.
that. They're crazy
Oh
about
yeah. Yeah,
that.
anything that vibrates, it gets that lateral line moving,
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
on.
yeah.
Um, but you're also selling carp flies. And so if you scroll down on your site, you can see the carp flies. And carp is kind of a big deal because you can find those most any waters. Not quite as prolific as panfish, but you can find them in a lot of places. And that has been in my area, at least it hasn't been a big species to target, but I have talked to friends that are increasingly targeting carp.
Well, yeah, that's true. The one thing you have to remember about carp fishing is you have to be real patient. You got to put it out there, leave it, wait for them to find it because they're not surface strikers. And thank you for the one that you made for me at the show. I like that. I haven't had a chance to try it yet or not, but it does have the weight on the front, and it should work well. And then I have another tire who makes one that looks like a mulberry.
Yes,
Apparently,
those are very
carp
popular.
like
They do.
mulberry.
If you
And
can find
you
a
said
mulberry
also,
tree,
yeah, and you said cottonseed
yes.
trees. Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I see them hitting a lot of cottonseed, and so that's
Yeah.
gonna be a really small hook with, if I were gonna tie one, I'd tie a really small hook, and I would use, some of the Fly Tires Dungeon, probably the check dubbing that floats,
Mhm.
and then I
Right.
would probably put a brown stem of chenille off the back of it if I were gonna tie
Mhm.
it, but I would probably wanna tie it
Yeah.
in a size 18 just because
Wow.
those cotton seeds are so small,
That's
and
true.
just
Yeah.
throw it out and just let it float, and they just
Yeah.
come up, and I've just seen them just come up and go through a whole cottonwood tree,
Yeah.
and it's amazing to watch them. I mean, they're really interesting fish.
I have never caught a carp on a topwater fly, but I understand that sometimes they do feed on the surface.
Mhm.
I've never seen that. The only ones I've
Yeah,
ever caught were sinking flies.
yeah. They'll and I've seen it a lot. They'll come up and they'll sort of open their mouth and they'll take, like, what sounds like a gulp of air, but they'll scoop in mulberries
Oh,
and they'll
yeah,
scoop in those
yeah,
cottonwood seeds as they sort
yeah.
of gulp, and I'm worried about, and like I said, I haven't caught one like that. I haven't tied a fly like that, but I'm kind of worried about how far down it's gonna get, because
Mhm.
I'm just not a big fan of, if you're not gonna eat it, don't kill it, you know what I mean?
Right,
Um,
right.
but that's the underrated thing is carp out of decent water are actually not bad tasting.
Oh, well, if you get on a 5 weight fly rod, you get a 4 pound carp on there. They go straight to the bottom and don't want to come up.
Yeah, and they're a great fish to catch. I mean, they're a lot of fun,
Oh
but
yeah, yeah.
it's one of those where, that's it's still I know there's a lot of flies out there, and you can look up a lot of different flies, but I think we're still in our infancy compared to other flies with
Mhm,
carp flies.
mhm. Oh yeah, no, I think there's room for some improvement and innovation. Maybe is a better
Mhm.
term, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
But
I know I've
I
seen.
I have a lot of people who fly fish for crappie now. Over the past few
Yep,
years, crappie fly fishing has become a big thing.
yep,
Have you
and
had?
that was the fly that I showed you that you like, that was originally the design was gonna be for crappie.
Oh, okay,
That
okay,
was gonna be
yeah.
the original design, and I've
Mhm,
I've even thought about taking that hook and wrapping a rattle around the underside of that hook and then putting a dumbbell eye on it so that it rides hook point up,
mhm,
and then
mhm.
with that fiber around it, I thought that would be a really nice crappie fly, and I've been working on that lately because it's crappie season.
Yeah. Well, speaking of dumbbell, here's one for crappie. It has the
Mhm,
dumbbells on it, and you can see it has chartreuse.
mhm,
Again, even for crappie,
yes.
I guess chartreuse is important.
I've noticed pink and chartreuse for crappie. If I'm throwing anything that's got pink or chartreuse on it, I'm catching crappie.
Let's see this one. If you can see this one here, this is chartreuse and white. But
Mhm.
pink, yeah, I think that would if you used pink here, that would work good. Yeah.
Yeah, the pink marabou on the tail, I think there's, and crappie are they're kind of weird, and this is my experience. I'm not a professional crappie fisherman. I don't target them all the time, but it seems like crappie have a better bite when the sun's out,
Hmm,
and those brighter colors work really well when the sun's out. And I've just noticed that
that's
just from
interesting.
my, yeah, just from my own crappie fishing. It
Yeah.
seems like if the sun goes behind a cloud, you might as well wait to cast until it comes back
Yeah.
out, you know. But I'm throwing bright colored flies, and that may
Yeah.
be part of it too. But
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we have poppers and both for brim and bass. My major suppliers are Pulse Popper Company in from California, the Boogle Bug from Birmingham, Alabama, and the one I showed you made from Tupelo tree root. That's BB Bugs, and they're out of Florida. Um, but they're all so they take great pride in their work. You know, they they want it to be a quality product. And let me tell you, I've seen some stuff been sent to me by people overseas. You know, want me to put their poppers on, and I say no, no. I don't
and,
want to.
and that's a good buyer beware for any fly.
Mhm.
Um, Kyle Ludwig, who does Drinking on the Fly with me, got a new job, so we have sort of put that on the back burner. But he ties flies, and I look at him, and we tried to. He said, "Let's do a show. We'll each tie a fly, and it'll be a half-hour show." Well, I can tie my fly and have plenty of time in a half hour. He takes 45 minutes.
Uh,
And I'm just sitting here rolling because he is just so meticulous about it. And when you get somebody that is looking at an artwork fly,
yeah.
I mean, I've got some of Kyle's flies, and they're not in my fly box. I mean, they're just too beautiful. But there has to be a line where you get to that form follows function, and I think that's a big deal. It needs to work and it needs to look nice, but you can't go all the way over on the other side. I mean, I don't know how much you got to walk around, but some of those flies down there at Salbug were just
Unbelievable.
gorgeous.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, some of them that they had framed were just, I mean, they were artwork. There's no
Yeah.
question about that. No question.
Yeah. I mean, they
Yeah.
absolutely were. I mean,
Yeah.
and that's sort of the rub as you get these, you get to the point where you're tying such beautiful flies. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
and then you don't want to, well, my friend that I cut all the barbs and the points off, I give him all my throwaway flies.
Uh, well, I got a question for you. When you bluegill fly fish, what weight fly rod do you prefer?
I use my 1 weight and I have a 2 weight. My 4 weight I found is way too big. And what I prefer to do, and you're gonna laugh, I prefer to put some kind of surface fly, whether it's a popper or a beetle, in say a size 8 or size 10 hook. And then I put like a rainbow warrior or a trout nymph below it. And I've actually hooked up on both flies at the same time.
Yeah.
And that is fun on the 1 weight.
Oh, I can imagine.
They start going against each other, and then they're both going against, and it is wild. And the thing with panfish is they're so resilient.
Yeah.
When you get them in, you take them off, and they hit the water, and they're gone. They're
Yeah.
not like trout where you've got to mess with them.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
not like large bass. I mean, you can exhaust a large bass.
That's true. You're playing a
Um,
little too long. That's right.
yeah, but panfish just seem to be right there, and so I absolutely love my. If I could find a 0 weight, I think if Pablo would call me and say I can build a 0 weight, I would say do it.
A
But
zero weight.
that 1 weight is amazing. I love it, and this is the funny story. I went fishing with my friend, and he was casting my 1 weight, and he's like, "Oh man," he's like, "This is incredible." And he was catching, panfish, bluegill on it. And he's like, "Where did you get this?" I said, "Well, I called Pablo." And so we got back because it's the ritual. We go fish and then we sit outside in the summertime because we smell bad, and we drink beer at one of the local wing joints here. And he goes, "What's Pablo's phone number?" Well, I give him, Pablo with the Bajuco Flats Fly Company that used to sponsor the show a lot. I give him Pablo's phone number. He gets on the phone and he orders the same fly rod in the same color with the same color wraps. And the only thing difference is mine says Kayak Flyer and his has his name on it.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, dude, seriously? I'm like, you could have got like, orange or pink or navy. You could have got any color, but you had to make it exactly like mine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then what was so funny was he's a really nice guy, and we always do really nice things for each other for Christmas. And he got me a matching BVK reel
Oh
in
wow.
1 weight. So
Wow.
now they're all identical. The line's identical. The leaders, we've got the cutthroat leaders, the really small cutthroat leaders on them. I mean, they're everything about them are identical, but the name, and it is hilarious.
I was going to say it's a good thing you have your name on there.
Yes, it is, and it's so funny because our wives make fun of us. Are you going out with your boyfriend today? You know, but it really is. It really, what it's like to have a fishing buddy. Where you can
Oh
go out and you
yeah.
can have a
Well, you
great
met
day.
my fishing buddy at Salbug, John.
Yes, yes.
But well, the next thing you'll be telling me is he wants to wear the same kind of clothes you wear. So, you look.
No, but do you remember the shirt that I wore down there? It said, "I like
Yes. Oh,
beer
yeah.
fly." He bought me that shirt for Christmas.
Oh, that was a great shirt. That was a great.
Yeah.
Well, getting back to the popper dropper rig, as I call it, where you use a something like a number six popper, and then about maybe 2-3 feet behind it, you use something like a sinking fly,
Mm-hmm.
and this acts as your indicator, and then the sinking fly goes down a little deeper, and it's not unusual at all to catch two fish on the same cast, which is a lot of fun too, by the way.
Oh, it's great. It's the
But
best.
I got tired of making those, cutting them and tying them and everything. So I have a company that makes one for me that has little quick chain snaps on it, and you can change this fly or the sinking fly without having to cut the line and retie it.
And now
Uh,
we've got to talk. Now
well,
we've seriously got to talk because that is trying to tie a knot on that hook shank is the biggest pain in the hind end for a guy like me that wears reading glasses.
well, are you familiar with little quick chain snaps? They've been around for years.
I've
They're
seen them, but I've never seen them where they could go around the
mhm.
first one.
Well, I'll send you one, and you can try it out.
Yeah.
It's called a popper dropper rig, and I strangely enough, I was bluegill fishing one day, and I caught two bass at the same time, and I was using a 5 weight. I'm telling you, I had to wade into the lake there and grab them by with my hands. I couldn't get them out.
I can honestly believe that the
Oh,
worst thing the worst quote quote worst thing was I caught a panfish on the popper, but then on that little rainbow warrior nymph I caught a smallie, and it
well,
was only like a 7-inch smallie,
yeah,
but a smallie's just a 7-inch smallie's like a 14
yeah.
inch anything else.
Maybe the smallie was trying to catch the brim.
That's what I'm thinking is what was going on, but it was hilarious, and there's just so much fun. And I know a lot of guys in the what do they call that? The conventional world, the tackle guys. I know the ultralights are amazing. If I'm out with my son or my daughter, my one of my daughters doesn't fish, so I always say my son and my daughter, and everybody gets weird because I've got 3 kids, but um, I like to use an ultralight rod and reel,
Yeah.
and because I like that it's not fly fishing, but it's close to it,
Yeah.
you know. And some of these poppers, especially the bigger bass poppers, you can still fish on an ultralight; they'll still cast.
Well, I have several customers who use ultralight, and they use the big bass poppers like this.
Hmm.
Obviously, you need a little bit of weight to,
Right.
to cast, and then some of them actually add a small, very small um bobber,
Hmm.
about 2 or 3 feet up, and I think they sell a clear bobber that it doesn't won't spook the fish as well. But yeah, I've got a number of customers that do that. It's
Yeah, I've
true.
got a friend of mine that he'll ask me to make woolly buggers and or wire wrap them, whether it's lead or lead free wire, depending on what I have. Because he seems to not doesn't bother him, so it doesn't bother me. But and then he'll put a spinner on it, and so he'll turn a woolly bugger into an inline spinner, and and now I've got to keep him out of my fly box.
Well, I have some customers that buy the little number one Hildebrandt spinner. Are you
Hmm.
familiar with those? They're real tiny, and then they
Hmm.
put a one of my black gnats with a red tail on the end, and they use it especially in moving water, rapid,
Yeah.
creeks and things. Those work very well. In fact, that was one of my dad's favorite when when he was teaching me how to fly fish.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Definitely. And I think that, as we're moving, I think we're seeing a confluence now where we're seeing a lot more folks cross over. And I've just noticed that in my friends. My friends that were all conventional gear guys have bought fly rods and they're starting to use those, but they still have confidence for certain days that they want to take out an ultralight. And I think at some point in time, we're going to start to mesh these together. And I think the best thing we can do for the sport is accept the new guys and even understand where they're coming from. And I think that's a big deal. And I think poppers and top water is one way we can do that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you. Speaking of poppers, when my dad would go bass fly fishing, this was his favorite: white body, black hackle with a
Mhm.
chartreuse tail. Well, I mean, I can still remember that he wouldn't. He would hardly use anything else, you know. And the interesting thing is, we talked earlier about peck and paw,
Mhm.
the Pex poppers. When he started making poppers back in, I think, in the 40s, his favorite popper was white. And he had this feeling that white in the morning, early morning or late afternoon was perfect for bass
Mhm.
fly fishing. So again, that may be just a preference on his part, but I've heard that early in the morning, late in the afternoon, white works really well.
And I will say that I agree with that. And with a frog, I make a foam frog. And so I outline the edges of that in a light yellow
Oh,
just
uh-huh.
because I've seen a lot of frogs. And we were talking before the show. I just got I'm getting into making my own poppers, but I think one of the things that I do is I'm going to just that outside edge. I'm just going to lay a light yellow on just to give it that look. And it's not so much for the coloring of it being light yellow, but just that gradual shade
Mm-hmm.
shift. And
Yeah.
again, looking down from the bottom, when you're looking at a lot of things, they're white like frogs. They're white on the bottom, and they've got a little darker cream and yellow color up the sides. And talking about the chartreuse and the different colors, I really think it's some of that shading really adds on. And so you can really tell when a guy puts his heart and soul into tying one of these. And you've got a lot that are just, like you said, they've got that red dot and
Yeah.
it's just popping there. And it probably looks like if I had to guess, it probably, and I'll get all scientific. It probably looks like an egg release, you know, um, and we all know that in life cycles, when something's full of eggs, that's when the most protein's there. So it probably gives it an indication of that, if I had to guess. But
That's
there's
good.
so many
Good.
subtle things you could do when you're doing this and when you're looking for them. And I think some of those things are really they're key. They're just that fish is just a little bit picky. 99% of the time it doesn't matter. But when they're a little bit picky, that red dot probably helps out a lot.
Yeah, what amazes me is I'll go one day and they won't hit anything but chartreuse. I go back the next day to the same spot and they won't hit chartreuse at all.
Let me ask you this, because this is an important question. How often do you change flies?
Well, that depends on how successful I'm being.
Well, I mean,
if,
yeah,
if
like if you're not getting a bite, how long do you stay with one fly? Because I get railed all the time because I like to stay with something, and I've got other friends that go through every fly in their box.
No,
Um,
I don't do that. Yeah.
okay.
Well, here's when I'm fishing. If I'm having success, then I stick with that fly. If I'm not having success with that color, I kind of examine my technique. Maybe I'm not fishing it properly. Maybe I'm trying to cast too often, too much movement, not enough movement. I evaluate that in my mind first, and then if I feel like I've done everything that fly is going to do, then I'll go to the next color. My favorite is yellow,
Hmm.
and then from that to white. Because I figure if they're not hitting the yellow and not chartreuse, then I need something a lot brighter because they're probably
Yeah.
looking for something brighter.
Yeah.
But
And I've
fish,
found that white and black when I'm looking at stuff, white and black.
Yep.
and then I can sort of narrow in a little bit more on different shades.
Hmm.
And that's always important too. But I know these guys that they'll throw a fly 10 times and they didn't get one, so they changed flies.
Yeah.
And I'm not all into that, you know.
Yeah. Well, the other thing you have to consider too, and this is what I try to remember, is if I start off with topwater lure and I'm not having success with it in any color, then I figure, well, I better go to a sinking fly because
Hmm.
they're not coming to the surface. It's not
Yeah.
the fly; it's the fisherman.
Yeah. And that's, you know, I mean, we're really not that far apart. If we wanted to fish one day, it wouldn't be a big deal for the two of us to fish, which I would love to do, especially, you know, beginning of June, um, because I don't have to work. Um,
uh,
I had 3 months of vacation. Aren't you jealous?
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but we can come down here and we can hit some of these creeks down here. And what I've found, crawfish patterns work really well.
Right.
And so I'm working. I've looked at and I've seen a bunch of different. I mean, Salbug, this kid, the kid right straight across from me that was 21, that won best saltwater and best of show.
Oh yeah, yeah. He was
Oh,
remarkable. Yeah.
and he's from St. Louis.
Is he really? I didn't realize that.
Yes, he's
Yeah.
from St. Louis. I sat there and talked to him, and he showed me this fly, and he's like, "Yeah," he goes, "This is how I tie it for the show. This is how I tie it to fish." And
Oh, that's
I
funny.
brought that. I took those, and this is, and I'm just going to say this for our listeners. If you've never been to a straight fly tying show, I'd wanted to go to the Sow Bug for about 6 years, and then it got shut down the last 2 years. And then Rick said he was going to be there with the dubbing brush tables. I'm like, I'm going to go down and hang out with Rick because I know him, and I've had Patty on the podcast and a bunch of folks on the podcast, a bunch more now, just like you. Um, but it was so interesting to see the techniques that were used and how I can modify that and change it. And I think for any serious fly tire, just going to an outdoor show is one thing, but going and looking at, you know, you had a ton of bugs that I just never really even thought about before.
Well,
And,
let
you
me
know, I
interrupt you there. I only had a portion of the bugs that I have on my website. I have over 400 different styles. So, what does that tell you? There's a lot of different people out there, a lot of different ideas as to what's going to catch fish.
yeah. And, you know, and that's one of the things, I don't know if you're like me. When I find a bug I like, I buy two. I buy
Oh,
one to
yeah.
fish, and
Yeah.
if it produces, I've got the other one to look at and see how to tie it.
Right. Right.
You know, I mean, that's how tires are. If you're not a
Yeah.
tire, you know, you sort of stop, you buy one, and it's nice to have a place where you can order from and get those. It's not like I hope they have that one in stock when I go back,
Right. Right. Right.
and
By the
being able to
way,
order online.
you mentioned fly tying. There's another uh, Tri Lakes is having their fly tying expo next Saturday.
Yes, and
Were you?
I unfortunately will be home because my wife will be out of town.
Oh, okay,
And
okay.
believe it or not, I'm closer to Cotter than I am to Kansas City.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm sure you're
Yeah,
closer.
yeah,
Yeah, it's just from St. Louis is about a 4.5 hour drive for me to
yeah,
get to Clinton, Missouri.
yeah. So you're
Uh,
about halfway on each way,
yeah,
and
yeah.
Cotter's 3 hours and 45 minutes if I drive fast.
Yeah, well, that's
4 hours.
yeah. We it took us a little over 4 hours from St.
Yeah,
Louis. Of course, I have to admit we drove in the rain all the way there, but that didn't help.
yeah. That's one of the things that I've made sure I've told my wife and a couple of my friends. I'm like, I'm going back next year. I'm leaving Thursday morning, stupid early. And if Rick's gonna be there, I'll help Rick out. But I spent so much time doing stuff, and I love Rick to death. So don't think I'm complaining. I love Rick. Rick is my boy, man. And he's been on the podcast enough. He's my guy.
Yeah,
If he's
yeah.
gonna be there, I'll help him out. But I am gonna just say I need like a block of time.
Mhm.
Because what amazed me was how many of the folks would tie a fly and then give it to you.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You know, I just thought we were going to watch them tie flies, and I thought, well, they'll put them on their store and they'll sell them. But everybody was so generous down there, and it's such a great experience. And if you're able to get to Cotter for the sow bug roundup, it's going to be the 23rd, 24th, and 25th next year is what I got an email about. I think it's going to be the Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Just mark the 24th. It's going to be right there around there. But that was such a good time. But getting to meet you and talk to you was huge. I mean, what are you doing down here? You got a vendor tag on. I'm like, oh, we're doing this. And then we get to talking and it's so much fun.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And the people are so nice. And of course, you hardly ever run into a fisherman that doesn't have a fish story to tell you. So I heard a lot of fish stories while I was there.
Well, I'm gonna tell you what, those Texas boys, those boys from Texas, they ain't right.
Oh, that's right. You were sitting at the table with them, weren't
Oh
you?
my, we were
Yeah.
around each other all weekend, and I'm gonna tell you what now. I had a great time, and I was told that if I went to Texas, I couldn't leave because I'd be an honorary Texan.
Well, we moved here to Missouri from Texas.
Ah, what part?
I lived just north of Houston. I lived in the country then between Spring and Tomball.
Okay.
And down there, they have all these what they call stock tanks
Mm-hmm.
or stock ponds.
Mm-hmm.
They go dig a hole in the ground and put
Yeah,
water in it.
and they call it a tank. We would call it a
The
pond,
tank,
but
that's
they call
right.
it a tank.
Yeah, yeah. And the amazing thing is they're just full of fish. I mean, they're just full of fish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a funny story just to divert for a second. I was at Houston for work. At my previous job, I was at Houston, and the Blues were playing whatever the Houston team is. Hockey. I didn't know they had hockey in the South.
I didn't either.
I thought I had to drive to St. Louis to see hockey. But anyway, um, I'm sitting at the bar at this hotel, and this guy is sitting beside me, and we get to, talking like, I mean, I like to talk to people. I'm a friendly guy. And I asked him about fishing. And he was telling me that he had a boat down here, just, at Galveston, I guess, where it was just south of Houston. And we really got to bullshit and having a really good time. And I said something. He goes, I own an art. He was telling me he owned this art gallery called Magnolia Grove,
Oh,
and
wow.
it's for Latino artists. And, I mean, I could pass as long as I didn't talk. Um, that's what the Spanish teacher tells me from Colombia, so I have to take her word for it. And come to find out, Cheech Marin is one of his guys that comes in and does a lot of stuff. And so I thought he was bullshitting me the whole time when he said that Cheech was staying at my hotel until I got back that night from drinking, and then I could smell it.
Oh.
So yeah,
Oh,
I
yeah.
was I was that close to meeting Cheech.
Yeah, you knew he was there, right?
You could follow him to his room.
Kind of like going to a Willie Nelson concert.
Yeah, kind of like that, but the biofuel was a little bit less.
Oh, well,
Oh,
before we get away from fishing, when I was in Texas, I I had a Ranger bass boat, and my
okay.
neighbor right across the street had a saltwater rig. So we either fly fished for bluegill and bass in my rig, or we went to Galveston and fished for saltwater fish in his rig. So,
Yeah.
oh gosh, we did some great fishing in Texas. Yeah.
That's the best of both worlds. And Ron was just on there talking about how great Texas fisheries were. And
Yeah.
I've not gotten the chance to fish Texas. I fished Louisiana. I talk about it a lot. I fished Florida. But I'm really wondering about, my wife said something about going to Mississippi this year. And I'm kind of wondering what the salt water would be like in the Gulf in Mississippi.
Well, here's what I'll do. My brother lives in Jackson, and he is a big kayak fly fisherman for saltwater fish, and he can put you on to some good guides and things. Yeah.
This is the only reason I do the podcast is to get these hookups. It's the I don't make
Yeah.
enough money to pay for it for an entire year with all my 3 sponsors. I just do it for the hookups.
Well,
But yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, he's the one who founded the Magnolia Fly Fishing Club in Jackson, Mississippi, probably 30 years ago, and they're still very active. But he has mastered the stand up kayak, and
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, I'm you've seen me. I'm too tall, too fat, and too clumsy to do that. I practice fly casting on a 5-gallon bucket in the backyard.
Oh gosh, well,
Oh.
yeah, I'd be glad to put you in touch with him.
Oh, Don, that
We,
would be great. And hey,
yeah.
we got 5 minutes left, and I know you're surprised by that. Go ahead and again, give us your website address and what people can look for and what they can find there.
Sure. It's brimbugs.com, and that's BREAMBUGS, brimbugs.com. And we've got over, as I said, we got over 400 different lures to choose from. And by the way, that includes hook sizes. Like, for example, the poppers I was talking about. Most of these come in 8 and 10, but a lot of them, like the bluegill special made by Pulse, he actually makes it in starting with 4, 6, 8, and 10. So when I say I have one fly, I have one fly with 4 different hook sizes. So it begins to add up. But anyway, yeah. And if you have any questions, send me an email, info@brimbugs.com. I try to give the best advice I can from the experience that I've had over the years fly fishing. Um, I did find out one thing: fish only bite twice a day, before you get there and after you leave.
That is the honest to God truth. I go to Louisiana. Oh, you should have been here yesterday. Yeah,
Yeah,
we catch
yes,
them all day yesterday. Yeah, we catch
yesterday.
all day yesterday. And
Yeah,
you know where they'll be biting, and but they ain't biting today. But tomorrow they'll be over that, and it's like, oh, you're killing me, guys. You're killing
uh,
me.
yeah.
But
Well, listen, I've really enjoyed visiting with you, and I'm glad I could give you some information about fly fishing in the bayous.
well, I appreciate it too. But I'm going to tell you
Yeah.
what we need to do. We need to make a date, and we need to get together.
Okay.
And I've got a couple of streams not too far for you to go away. I'm
Great.
sure you've got employees. You can just make them work. You can
Yeah.
take a day off.
Well, you met
Um,
my friend John.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
you said he's your friend, but
Yeah.
is he gonna work or is he gonna come down and
Well,
fish?
if he finds out I'm going fishing, then he may not work for me.
And let's go fishing, and then let's do another podcast and
Okay.
talk about the flies that we liked the most when we were fishing some of these small streams. I mean, that's a win-win for me.
Absolutely. And
Uh,
I'll send you one of those popper dropper rigs,
yeah,
and I'll send you the information on how to reach my brother, and we'll go from
yeah.
there.
I tell you what, this is the best thing about it, man. It's all about meeting people, and I know I've said this a lot on the podcast, but if you're new to fly fishing, find a club.
Oh yeah,
Reach out
absolutely.
reach out to any of these guys that are on the podcast. I mean, they make their self readily available, and any of the folks on the podcast want to talk to you because the best thing we can do for the sport is conservation of the fish, making sure they're taken care of, and supporting our guys that are here in America.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely,
that's
absolutely.
the thing we have to do.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I don't get political on here, but I'm always talk about supporting Americans, supporting vets.
yeah,
Take somebody, if you're a fisherman, take somebody fishing that hadn't been, and watch your conservation,
yeah,
because that's the best things you can do. And you got a question, reach out to Don, man. He will help you out if you're interested in getting into the ultra light of fly fishing. You're not going to be sad. I mean, this is awesome. If you're wanting to start carp fishing, he's got great carp flies. If you want to chase big bass, he's got bass flies. Guys, just check it out and follow up. And we'll talk to everybody next week. Don, this has been great.
my pleasure. Thank you very much.